as more and more adoption happen in this space, it is required to have horizontal scalability. And it's important to really just spin off more rollups to enable an additional usage from the user instead of vertical expand. And that itself made me pretty excited. It's just because one of the goal of Parallel on the L2 side is to really connect with more other L2s and other chains to make the liquidity more concentrated. So I think if the future is multi-chain indeed, and if the future indeed have hundreds of chains, I think eventually users would want to have some layers of abstraction instead of just using all of them at once.
Hey everybody, Tanner here with WAGMI Ventures. On today's episode, we have Yubo Ruan, the founder of Parallel. For anyone who's new, this is the WAGMI Ventures podcast where we do snapshots with interesting builders, founders, and investors from across Web3. Check out wagmiventures.io to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. But for now, let's get into it with Yubo at Parallel. All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Tanner. This is the WAGMI Ventures podcast, and I'm here today with Yubo Ruan, who's the founder at Parallel. Yubo, how's it going today? What's going on?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for asking. A lot of things going on. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll jump into a lot of that. It's a lot of cool stuff happening at Parallel.
Yeah.
So just here to kick off, I'd love to, you've had kind of this remarkable journey in crypto so far. You've been an engineer, an investor, a serial founder. So I'd love to maybe jump back to the beginning a little bit. Tell us, how did you get into crypto and what's your evolution in the space looked like leading up to starting Parallel?
Yeah, well, it's at the beginning, it was quite a coincidence. I was starting with my own sort of engineering career. I learned about embedded programming when I was 6 and started to create and participate in robotic competition. That gives me a lot of experience in the hardware space. And I created my first company in high school, which is a smart piggy bank that helped children to learn financial habits. We manufactured the products and eventually sold the company. And then, I went to college and I spent a lot of time to think about what is the next thing that I wanted to do. And then at that time, I had an opportunity to work at, engineering companies as software engineers, Otter AI, later on TrueFi as a smart contract engineer. And then I also had an opportunity to work at 2 venture funds. One of them is DHVC. So I was super lucky to, work in the crypto space to help them find deals and, do research. And that is how I got into crypto at the beginning. And then because of that, investment opportunity, I had the chance to start my own crypto fund. We raised, and then we started a Decimal Capital around 2017. And that's kind of how I got started full-time into the investment space. And then eventually I decided to start Parallel in 2021 after dropping out of Stanford. I think that this is a new sort of chapter for my life that because I'm really interested in building versus purely investing.
Very cool. Okay, awesome. So before we talk more about Parallel, let's talk about this genesis of Parallel a little bit. And maybe just, a simple way into that question might just be, how did you land on conviction that this was the right opportunity for you personally to invest your time and effort into?
In a high level, if we zoom out a little bit, I see that there's just a tremendous demand for trustless communication, computation, and the decentralization of asset itself. I'm from Beijing, and there's capital control, and there's no true ownership of your own assets. So when I first stumbled into blockchain, the first project I looked into is compound finance, and I realized that just by simply having hundreds of lines of code, users can truly own something that is remarkable, in my opinion. And I think this is critical for the financial freedom for our society. So I think that this is the future. It's definitely going to happen. And then, so I wanted to really contribute and be part of this, revolutionary journey.
Very cool. Okay. So with that context, I'd love to talk a little bit more in depth about Parallel. So in your own words, maybe to kick us off, could you describe or explain what Parallel is and what it enables?
Yeah. So Parallel is a network of both a lending protocol and then a layer 2. On one hand, the lending protocol, it positions itself as a cross-chain lending protocol that we want to support universal assets. You can think of any ERC20 tokens, NFT tokens, as well as, potentially real-world assets. We wanted to build a really good protocol that enables wider range of asset selections, and then, different mode of lending and borrowing. That's on one hand. And on the other hand is that we wanted to also expand our existing protocol into a rollup where users can enjoy, of course, cheaper gas, faster speed, and then, enable more application developers to build on top. The vision on the layer 2 side is that the current ecosystem in the current sort of chain L2, L1 ecosystem, there are just so many different chains and it won't stop. And we see that there's fragmented liquidity as well as this complexity of using different blockchain. So what if we can actually create a layer 2 that have the connectivity with more blockchains and then aggregate different assets into our chain? In this way, users will be able to sort of do cross-chain application or multi-chain application in a much easier fashion. That's the long-term vision for the chain. And currently we're available for developers to build on top, but we haven't fully launched for the end users at this moment.
Very cool. Okay, awesome. Hey everybody, quick thing here. We're excited to announce WAGMI Advisory, your home for all things fundraising, hiring, and partnerships. This is all about supercharging your project with the WAGMI network consisting of over 20,000 executives, investors, and builders in crypto, all ready to come alongside your project to help it succeed. Get in touch at team@wagmiventures.io to learn more and figure out if WAGMI Advisory is the right fit for your project. Now, let's get back to the show. So, as just kind of a concrete question here, can you make super explicit for us and maybe unpack, why parallel is a valuable thing at scale, thinking mainly like second order effects, like what happens to the crypto space if parallel is widely adopted at scale by end users once it's kind of time to get there?
Yeah, I think if we succeed, we can become one of the hub to glue multiple ecosystems together. Now you can see there is the, Superchain by Optimism, there's Hyperchain by zkSync, Orbit by Arbitrum, and they're interconnected ecosystem. But then I think one level above, there need to be some connectivity in between. And then of course, we also need applications to be able to not just deploy on 10 different chains and confuse users, but actually the application can deploy just on one chain and then help user to manage their money. So if we succeed, I think we contribute toward this, simple and easy of use for users, and then also the concentration of liquidity, which improve capital efficiency for the end user.
Very cool. Okay. So, one recurring question on this podcast is really around early challenges, right? Like nothing new starts on like a linear path with no obstacles, right? There's always, and kind of the way that folks decide and teams decide to solve these challenges often has kind of a path dependency for the life of the organization. So I'm curious if you can talk maybe about just one challenge early on, can be technical or could be a business challenge, one thing that your team had to solve that really kind of has the DNA or fingerprint of how your team thinks about things. Could you talk us through maybe one of those?
Yeah, so potentially one of the examples that I can give is during the time when we create the lending protocol in the Ethereum space, we first look into the NFT asset, and then we want to provide loan against NFT asset. The hard thing is about how to price accurately about a specific NFT. There wasn't really a golden standard of how to price it and how to evaluate. And especially given the liquidity is not as much compared with ERC20, there's a lot of challenges when we first designed a protocol. I think we did a lot of research, very concrete, quantitative research on historical pricing of NFTs, the correlation between the NFT pricing versus the broader market, as well as how does the individual NFT sometimes, how does it behave against the floor price? What are some of the relationships? With all the data and all the research we have done, our team was able to create a more comprehensive pricing model, which is based on essentially the combinations of floor price, at the same time, a multiplier on top of the floor to determine an individual NFT's price. And then on top of that, we are able to build a lending protocol to efficiently underwrite NFT risks, provide loans to NFT holders, but at the same time, manage the sort of the volatility and then the market risks of the underlying NFT to make sure the lenders have the relevant return given certain risks. Yeah, I think that will be a good example of how we sort of be one of the first protocol to explore a unsolved problem and then create solutions to make this problem really solved and make the customer happy.
Yeah, that's great. Super, super interesting. Okay, so another recurring question is often just kind of excitement about trajectory. So like, where do you see this going or evolving? Maybe to bracket the timeline over like the next year or two, if you could maybe have a crystal ball, what gets you most excited as you kind of look down the future for Parallel?
Yeah, I think one of the very exciting future for us is that first, our lending protocol will be deployed on our own L2, and it will be cross-chain and multi-chain. It means that we're not only targeting for a single chain users. For example, you're just a native Ethereum users or native, let's say, Solana user, but we're targeting the lending protocol will be targeting for so-called multi-chain users, right? So you have the asset on not just one ecosystem, but many. In this way, we are able to create a lending market that efficiently provide loans across any assets in this, blockchain ecosystem. That's on one hand. On the other hand, I'm very excited about the sort of the growth of layer 2 itself. I see that as more and more adoption happen in this space, it is required to have horizontal scalability. And it's important to really just spin up more rollups to enable, the additional usage from the user instead of vertical expand. And that itself made me pretty excited. It's just because one of the goal of Parallel on the L2 side is to really connect with more other L2s and other chains to make the liquidity more concentrated. So I think if the future is multi-chain indeed, and if the future indeed have hundreds of chains, I think eventually users would want to have some layers of abstraction instead of just using all of them at once.
Very cool. Okay. Super interesting. So I'd love to take a step back and just ask a couple maybe more general questions about the space sort of writ large here, where, the first question might be, this is obviously an interesting moment for the crypto and blockchain space, right? And so I'm curious from your vantage point as both a founder and an investor, how do you view the state of crypto these days? Like, where are we at and how should people think about the season that we're in?
And just purely my personal opinion, we are likely to be in a beginning of a larger cycle, a larger bull run cycle, which might exist for the next, 1 year or half. At the same time, I think from a crypto adoption perspective, we are still very early, very, very early. One of the biggest use case is stablecoin payments. If you go to Southeast Asia, a lot of people use Tether to do payments, and it was widely adopted to some surprising level. And then at the same time, I would say that most of the on-chain activities aren't driven by not so much of real-world use cases yet. A lot of them are based on speculation. I think that's okay at the beginning of new industry or early, since we're very early in the new industry. As we are able to connect more asset on-chain and more data, to the blockchain ecosystem, I see that we can really create a new kind of paradigm to build applications. It could be really just the new way of running a shared economy apps like Uber or Airbnb, or it can be some sort of incentive mechanism for AI applications to acquire qualified data. Those are all possible, but probably in the next few years. And then I also see that from a developer perspective, the numbers of developers has been increasing monotonically. Sometimes it is related to how the market is behaving. In the bull run, there's more developers. In the bear markets, there's not much. But overall, we're in the uptrend. And then that is a good sign, just because I think the economic value that the crypto market creates is directly correlated to the numbers of developers and the numbers of apps that are building on top. The infrastructure has been, way mature than that of many years ago. And then I think we're probably very close to the edge of having some amazing killing apps that are able to build on top of the current infrastructure. So we're not that far away.
Love it. Okay. I share your excitement for the application layer maturing. I think it's a really interesting moment there. So, maybe one or two last questions here for you. I think one question would be, if you could go back to the beginning of your sort of crypto founder journey and impart some advice from your current position of, we'll call it your current position of wisdom, right? Your current experience, your current knowledge. What advice might you want to give to your younger self about how to navigate building in crypto? And, your team, obviously, you guys raised from some fantastic investors. You guys have done it super well. I think I'm curious for any other founders out there listening, if they could hear how you might have done things differently, how would you approach that question?
I think not all the best technology win, right? Sometimes I think there have to be some balance between creating the finest, most powerful and most innovative solutions and technologies versus take the right timing to go to market. I have to balance both, in my opinion. If I were to tell my younger self, I would say that perhaps, let's say you make the product, 85%, 90% ready, but then you capture the right time, it will be much, much better than having the product 95% to 100% ready, but you miss the timing. First to market matters a lot. People have this tendency to support sort of one of the first projects to solve a problem, or one of the first project that have a huge quote unquote narrative. So I think it's super important to capture the right time. When there is a demand, I think just go ahead and launch. Don't have to make it perfect.
Love it. Okay. Yubo, last couple questions here for you. What's your team working on right now, and what's the best way for people to follow along on the journey?
Yeah. First of all, of course, follow us on Twitter or go to our website at parallel.fi. We also have Discord. And then our team, again, it's divided into two parts. On one hand is on the lending business. We're expanding to different chains. And then on the other hand, part of our team is working on a new kind of layer 2 to empower our application, but at the same time to enable more developers to build on top. So we are working on those two areas at this moment.
Perfect. Yubo, thank you so much for the time. Really fascinating work you guys are doing, and I'm excited to follow along on the journey myself. So have a great start to your week here, and take care.
Thank you so much. Have a good one. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and maybe give us a good 5-star rating and subscribe wherever you're getting your podcasts so you can get all the latest conversations with the most interesting crypto founders, investors, and builders from across the world. Thanks so much. Have a good one.